Last year, I took part in an event with Utah Public Radio commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 1918 armistice that would lead to the ending of World War I. And it was a great event. People went there and told their stories. They showed us a lot of the relics that they had collected, mostly from their family members. And then they were able to dig these up, and they were here to tell the stories of these relics and why these relics were so important to them. The stories that they had to tell were really enlightening and interesting because I think too many people don't appreciate what happened in World War I. Considering the time of year it is, I noticed another anniversary that is coming up here. That, of course, is June 6th. That is the anniversary of the landing in Normandy on D-Day of the Allied forces when they came to occupy Europe from Nazi Germany and her allies. We've all seen documentaries about D-Day and Operation Overlord when the British, Canadian, and American forces crossed the English Channel to free occupied Europe from the clutches of Nazi Germany. The landings on Omaha, Utah, Juneau, Sword, and Gold Beaches, taking the Axis completely by surprise as this new front was opened up in Europe that ushered in the final phase of World War II. So we see the actions of generals and the movements of armies and military units portrayed all the time on TV. But the folklorist in me, of course, often seeks out the more personal views on things and the personal accounts that people have. It's interesting and important to know what General Eisenhower had organized and how they led the forces onto the beaches. But what about those common everyday people who came out onto the beaches under heavy fire, forces hiding in their pillboxes, hiding behind walls, pounding those people who were on those beaches? It is that I want to emphasize today as I discuss D-Day. And there are two accounts that I would like to read that have someone's personal experiences that they had on D-Day. And the first one is by a man named Rob Morris. So Rob Morris was a combat engineer. His job was to remove the mines and other explosives that the Nazis had left behind in the water to stop any incoming invasions. And of course, we need to get rid of those things so that ships can move in up on the beaches and take control of the beaches there on Normandy. By the time of the invasion, we knew exactly where we were supposed to go and what we were supposed to do, said Rencher. Our job was to detect and disarm all the different types of mines that the Germans had in the water and on the landing beaches. They had around 20 different types. There were half a dozen mines just for personnel, as well as tank mines and water mines. Some were concrete with dynamite inside. Some came up out of the ground 6 feet when you set them off and exploded right in your face. Rencher's three-man squadron consisted of himself, Otis Ham of Biloxi, Mississippi, and Dan Schellenberg of Youngstown, Ohio. Ham was the veteran, said Rencher. He'd made all 3 previous invasions. He knew how to detect and disarm anything. Schellenberg and I were only 18 when we began training, and he made us as professional as he was. Ham was tough and demanding taskmaster. He knew that his survival depended on training the 2 younger men to do their jobs to perfection. He hounded them, pushed them, and beat them into becoming a well-honed team. As a veteran of the 3 previous beach assaults, Ham had no delusions about the deadliness of their mission. There was little room for error. He figured, based on the experiences, that he would be the one of the 3 of us who would not be killed, and that Schellenberg and I would be killed, remembered Rencher. Their task required good ears, steady hands, and more than a little luck. For each mine, we had to find the teeny tiny detonator, recalled Rencher. We worked as a team. One of us had the mine detector, a disc about 1 foot across with a handle and a meter with a dial on it. There were earphones that would hum, and the dial would tell you when it had detected metal. We had to detect each mine. We had to disarm them, and often the mines themselves were booby-trapped. General Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had ordered 50 million mines for the beaches. At the time of the invasion, he had over 20 million of them installed. The best day for attack would have been June 5th, but the weather was too rough. June 5th and 6th had the lowest tide for the next 6 months. The 5th was ideal, and the 6th was not quite as good, but General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, decided to go for it on the 6th. We were loaded onto 10 LCT ships the night of June 5th, and then we waited for the calm. We left about 6 p.m. H hour was at 0600 hours, and the 531st had to land at 0500 to clear the beaches. The waves were about 5 feet high, and we got very seasick. In a way, being seasick helped us because we couldn't stand to stay on the landing craft any longer. About a half-mile off the beach, they loaded us onto 30-man landing craft for the final approach. Utah Beach was eerily quiet. I had 60 pounds of explosives in my pack, both TNT and composition explosives, said Rencher. The good thing about the TNT was that a bullet could pass right through it and it wouldn't blow up. You had to have a blasting cap to detonate it, but I also had to carry those. If a bullet hit one of the blasting caps, it would have detonated that 60 pounds of TNT, and I would have been completely vaporized. Minesweepers we don't hear a lot about on D-Day, of course, but everyone who took part, everybody had a job that was very important. This particular account, of course, is just a short version of what the soldier went through on D-Day for the Allies to get onto the beaches. This is the second account that I'm going to read to you about D-Day. The soldier we're talking about here, his name is Robert Watson, and his account was written down by someone else. Robert Watson was a common regular soldier coming out there onto the beaches, and this is his story. "Bob, get your act together," Robert Watson told himself and kept repeating it. "I don't want to die here. I don't want to die here." Nothing went as planned. In the pre-dawn darkness, the craft carrying the tanks took longer than expected to form up, and the assault infantry hit the beaches without armor protection. The various waves of landing craft became mixed up in the confusion. "Every landing craft was taking on water like crazy," said Watson. "LCVPs began sinking. Those that stayed afloat took enemy fire. Landing craft were exploding around me." Watson succumbed to seasickness and threw up. He was not alone. At least he could see the church steeple in Colville, telling him he was on target. The enemy fire spooked the coxswain, who slowed his craft to a crawl. "Get to the beach," the army officers yelled at him. "Get this thing going." Their reprimand worked. He gave it more power. That's when Watson's LCM, about 300 yards from the beaches, hit the floating mine. He then hitched a ride from the LCVP and reached the carnage of Omaha Beach. Watson remembered what the general and the deck officer had told him about the signal boat and the battlefield preparations. None of it had come true. There was no control boat over the water. There were no bomb craters on the beaches to use as foxholes, and he never saw the Allied plane. Watson joined the firing line as ordered by the captain. About 300 yards to his right, he could see Germans running behind WN-62 to a reinforced hut, retrieving supplies. He loaded his wet ammunition clips into his rifle and took aim. I was scared that the ammunition wouldn't work, he said, but he squeezed off his first shot without any problems. He then fired about 10 clips at the enemy. I don't know if I killed anyone or not, said Watson. I didn't really care. After doing his part in reducing WN-62, Watson decided to head back to the beaches and perform his job. My orders were to get on the beach line and move to the beach station while he searched for his uncle. He came across Lieutenant James F. Collins, the medical officer. He took a look at Watson's lacerated leg and said later, Company B sailors gathered just before WN-62. Out of the entire company, there were only 36 left. A lot of the boys didn't show up, said Watson. One missing man was Lieutenant Wade. He never made it to the beach. Of course, all of this was a complete shock to those soldiers. As we heard with the prior account, if anyone's going to survive, it's going to be this person. Or if anyone's going to survive, it's going to be this person. He's too tough to die. Like I said about the people that I spoke to, personally, I have only heard personal accounts where they talked about being scared jumping out of a plane, or they were terrified as they came onto the beach, uncertain if the Allies had control of the beaches yet. I never heard any personal accounts of people who actually were receiving fire as they came out onto the beach. So every one of these stories is of big significance and it is touching to me. You can always read this, and a lot of times when you read these accounts, it really doesn't have as much of an emotional effect to you, because you are not hearing it out loud from the person who is going through the experience. I always want to remember the personal sacrifices that these people made in order to fight for freedom and to keep the Nazis and other Axis powers from causing more trouble in Europe. People have often said that, well, if we hadn't landed on D-Day or done this and that, then the Russians were actually already winning. It's like, well, the Soviets were losing a heck of a lot of soldiers. Eventually they would have won if they had been fighting on their own. However, Europe would have been a much different place, and we definitely wouldn't want to be living in that world today. I want you all to appreciate what the people of the greatest generation had done for us and what it is that we can learn from them, because we just do not appreciate how hard things were for them. We may think that today things are really difficult, but we don't really know what tough is or difficult is in comparison with them. This is my account that I wish to talk about today on D-Day. And this is affiliated with my Bail Edition-ish podcast, but I wanted to do one specifically for D-Day so that I can really engulf myself in it and not have it mixed up with too many other folklore subjects. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any accounts or if you have any comments that you would like to leave for me, my email address is folklorenow33@gmail.com. And if you have a story that you would like to share with me that I could share with everybody else, I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for listening, and have a nice day.